everybody. I'm Jake Peterson.
And I'm Schademann.
Today we're going to be talking about the post-bowl coverage, on our thoughts on what has happened so far throughout this bowl season. It's been pretty much a roller coaster for every team, I would say. A lot of comebacks and a lot of surprises. Wouldn't you agree?
I definitely agree, Jake.
All right, well, first of all, I'm going to just give my thoughts. I think there's been a lot of surprises, in this bowl season, as we all know. I think the Big Ten and the Pac-12 were the two best surprises, I think, for a lot of people. The Pac-12 having just 2 losses, the Big Ten going 5-5. I truly believe that the Pac-12, though, had probably the best bowl season. However, I do think, though, they're a little bit misleading in that category. They didn't play one SEC team, and they did end up losing. And the 2 losses they did have, they shouldn't have been losses. They're really bad losses. Oklahoma State beating Washington. All the credit in the world to Okie State. I think Mike Gundy had those guys ready. And then Boise State beating Arizona. That should not have happened for Arizona's sake. So just a couple of disappointing losses there for the Pac-12. And then all the wins they had were, frankly, really close for the most part, except for, of course, the Oregon-Florida State game. So my overall opinion, I think the Big Ten had the more impressive bowl season, but obviously the Pac-12 had the better record. I
definitely agree. I think the Pac-12 did a pretty good job this year in the bowl season with highlight with that blowout win of Oregon against Florida State in the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. But just like what Jake said, I do believe that the Big Ten was like the best surprise because they were kind of doubting them. Even in the Michigan State game, they were going to say people failed to crush Michigan State, but Michigan State came back 21 points behind in the fourth quarter to pull off the victory with Pat Nardutti's last game as the defensive coordinator in East Lansing because he's taking over the head coaching job at Pittsburgh. And I do agree, Jake, that the Big Ten did have the best surprise, but in the Pac-12 did have the best record.
Yeah, what made the Big Ten so unique this year, I think, in the bowl season more than anything is there was literally every Big Ten team that was playing in their bowl game was an underdog, literally. And that's a pretty big thing to do, the fact that you can win half those games. It's pretty impressive. To me, though, there were a lot of those games, I think, that could have gone either way. I felt like there were a few of those games, particularly the Michigan State-Baylor game. I thought that Michigan State was outplayed in that game. Baylor, I think, for whatever reason, just happened to let off the dogs there in the fourth quarter. I think if they didn't do that, I think Baylor would have ended up blowing them out in that game. However, I do see, though, a lot of these other wins, Wisconsin over Auburn, that was just a downright win for Wisconsin. I think you have to look at, of course, Ohio State over Alabama, probably their biggest win of the season for the Big Ten. That was just a huge, huge win for Ohio State, and they did. They just downright beat them. Alabama didn't have their best game, and Ohio State took advantage of that, and they exposed that run defense of Alabama.
Yeah, because Ezekiel Elliott had a heck of a game for Ohio State, including the 85-yard touchdown run.
Yep.
And just like what Jake mentioned, as far as and also with the most disappointing conference is the SEC this year because despite them being considered like the best conference in America, they were not the best conference in America in the bowl season. And it was kind of disappointing to see from the SEC on what they still need to improve on, and they need to improve on a ton. And with this new college football playoff, it'll be more difficult for SEC teams to dominate in the playoffs now.
Yeah, I think that's what the goal was for the playoff committee, was to try to make it as difficult as possible for any team, not just the SEC. But yeah, it does make it that much more difficult for the SEC to try to get into the finals, obviously. I think the SEC did. I think Will said it right. I think the SEC struggled, particularly the West, of course. The East did, I think, just fine. They finished 5-0, so... but the West did. They just downright struggled 2-5. They should have gone 1-6 had Clint Trickett been playing in that game for West Virginia. I feel like West Virginia probably would have blown them out. There was a lot of missed wide open throws from their backup. So I think when you looked at the SEC West, particularly from top to bottom, very overrated. I just felt like this was a conference that I thought coming into this bowl season that would dominate, as everybody else did, and they didn't. They didn't deliver. And Alabama in Oregon, Alabama against Ohio State, rather, that was just a game where Alabama didn't show up. They had their chance to represent the SEC West. They didn't. And then you got, of course, the most outstanding game, in my opinion, of the bowl season, the Ole Miss TCU game. That was just unreal. There's nothing Ole Miss could do in that game. I don't blame Bo Wallace in that game necessarily. Everybody else is. I don't think they had any time, though, from their O-line whatsoever. And not to mention, too, TCU, I just think was that good in that game. But, however, yeah, the SEC definitely a very struggling conference. I thought the Big 12 struggled quite a bit this conference, this bowl season as well. I think Oklahoma State, TCU were the only two teams that got wins in that category. Baylor should have had a win. Kansas State, frankly, should have had a win over UCLA. But then when you look at the other games like Oklahoma and Texas, where they just got downright beaten, it was frankly embarrassing for the Big 12. But there's nothing you can do about it. It is what it is, and you have to move on from it if you are a Big 12 fan out there. But, the thing is, overall, I felt like the SEC, though, was definitely the most struggling conference just because they had the highest expectations. So
I definitely agree. All right, and now we will be discussing some of the games that were in the bowl games schedule. First, we got Louisiana Tech over Illinois, 35-18. And Louisiana Tech played pretty well with transfer from Iowa, Cody Silko as a quarterback. And Illinois just had no answers for Louisiana Tech in their offense, in my opinion.
yeah, I liked the way Louisiana Tech handled the ball. I thought they did really well at forcing turnovers. I thought Louisiana Tech's defense stood up to the occasion against Illinois, and frankly, Illinois was overmatched. I just didn't see a reason to think that Illinois should have won that game in any way possible, and they didn't. I had Louisiana Tech beating Illinois, and it turned out that La Tech delivered. I think a lot of people had Louisiana Tech beating Illinois in that game. So, you got to look at a game like Texas A&M, West Virginia. Texas A&M taking out West Virginia 45-37. Of course, that controversial sideline issue with the student coach. Which was frankly embarrassing and unexcusable for a guy like him to just represent the coaching staff like that. That was just inexcusable, and good for Kevin Sumlin to take him out of that picture and put him to where he belongs, which is unemployment. I think, though, when you look at West Virginia's performance against A&M, they should have won. I think West Virginia was the better team. They had more talent than Texas A&M did. But give Texas A&M credit. Kyle Allen delivered at quarterback for A&M. He took advantage of a lot of the turnovers that were given from West Virginia. And there was just really no answer for West Virginia's defense. I just felt like the defense started off well, but then they just kind of faded there in the second half. And I think it was all because of the momentum that was swinging towards Texas A&M's way. And the backup for West Virginia, he was decent, but not great. He didn't do a lot in the second half particularly. The whole West Virginia team didn't. I felt like if Clint Trickett was in that game, I thought that West Virginia probably would have made that game not only a win for them, but could have even been ugly. There was a lot of wide open throws that this backup of West Virginia's really missed, and it would have been, frankly, a momentum swing in my opinion.
I definitely agree, Jake, because Clint Trickett was forced to retire due to some concussion issues and some issues with his health, which is a shame for a young kid like him.
Yeah, and he's a very good player, smart kid, and there's no question he'll be it's somewhere in the coaching staff in the college football world. And I know he's a very smart kid. So.
Yeah. All right, and now we're going to go to Notre Dame and LSU, where Notre Dame beat LSU 31-28 on a last second field goal by Notre Dame's kicker. LSU had control of this game for a long time, Jake, but then Notre Dame just kept coming back, and then suddenly in overtime they pulled it off 31-28, which was a shock in my book. I was expecting LSU to beat Notre Dame.
Yeah, I think LSU they bit the bullet eventually. It was just the problem it's the quarterback play, and it's been their problem this whole season. The fact they can still win 8 games in this season, I'd consider that a huge accomplishment for Les Miles' team. If LSU can start finding a way to recruit some really good quarterbacks, LSU is going to be unstoppable. They have the running back position, they have the offense, they have everything except for a quarterback, and that's been their biggest issue this season, of course. And it eventually came back and bit them in this bowl game. Now you look at a team like a bowl game like Washington, Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State won that game. They should have won it by a lot more than what they did. Washington ended up waking up a little bit in the second half, but Oklahoma State, I felt like, still could have had a lot more stops than what they were.